Hello everyone, welcome to the topic 7 of the coded UI training. From here onwards, we are going to talk about pretty specific to the coded UI automation testing. Let's look at the agenda, what we are going to talk about today. We are going to understand the .UI testing namespace. We are going to look at what is the basic scripting flow. We are going to talk about UITestControl and UITestControlCollection. Then we are going to create some of the sample objects using C# for encoded UI test, and then we would be talking some of the fundamental things of the UI controls, that is child controls, parent controls. We would be applying some sort of filter and search properties. We would be seeing the multiple ways of assigning a properties to the control. Then we would be working on some of the examples that will help us getting matured in terms of creating objects on a page. And then I would be also introducing the UI validation at the fundamental level. Then we'll see, we'll work with the edit boxes. There are multiple ways to work on edit boxes and buttons. We would be seeing some sort of actions using those controls. And then we would be finalizing our first end-to-end coded UI test, which would be by hand coding, that is C#. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to name it One Test Solution Coded UI Training. The project cannot be created because, okay, coded UI, sorry, that project already exists. So I'm going to create it. Okay, this is a coded UI test builder. If we have to record actions or we have to do recording, then we utilize this particular utility. But at this point in time, we are going to be more concerned for the hand coding, so I'm going to hit cancel. I'm not able to see some of the windows here, so I'm going to view those windows. I need to see Solution Explorer, and I need to see Theme Explorer. I don't need. And then I'm going to see the Text Explorer windows. Or maybe that's fine. We can get it later. Okay. So this is the new coded UI test class that has been created. I'm going to rename this class, and I'm going to say module 7. It is asking to refactor it, so I'm going to refactor this so the references will be updated. You see here now module 7 has come up, and this is the constructor also been changed. Okay, so first thing we need to understand what is this namespace, Microsoft.visualstudio.testtools.ui testing. This particular namespace provides the classes for coded UI support. So basically this provides classes for coded UI test. Whatever the basic operation will be performing, controls, everything comes under this particular namespace. Okay, now I'm going to remove, clean up this little bit, and also I'm going to change my method name. This is basically the test script. This is the place where we are going to write test scripts. Test scripts in coded UI are going to be are specified by test attribute called as test method. Every test method is basically a script in coded UI test. Let's say you have to write 10 scripts. That means you are going to write 10 test methods. We will be talking more in details about the different test attributes that are available in coded UI test. I think we have that 14th or 15th module as far as this training goes. Okay, so I'm going to write here basic test. So okay, now we need to understand what are the basic steps that we need to write as far as the scripting goes. So first thing is that we need to specify, or we need to launch application. Application may be a web-based, where we need to launch web browser, or it can be a desktop-based application. So this is the first thing we need to do. Then second thing that we need to do is we need to create the objects. We need to create or design the UI controls. Third thing that we need to do is we need to perform some actions. We need to perform some actions on it. Perform actions. And after performing the action, we need to validate the output of it, or the outcome of it. So we have to perform validation logic. Validation logic. This is the place where this is basically assertion. So it will have two outcomes. Either if my validation is successful, that means if it's success, then my test is pass. If my validation is unsuccess, if my validation is not validated, sorry, spelling mistake here. If it's not successful, that means my test is fail. So one thing is for sure very clear, that without step 4, without validation, we cannot have an exit criteria of a test or of an automation script. If we don't have validation logic in place, that means my test script is incomplete. All right. Okay. So let's see how we create. Let's start from the first step. How we launch. We are going to look at the web-based application. Over the period of time, we'll see desktop-based applications as well. So for web-based application, we need to launch a web browser. The default browser in coded UI testing is Internet Explorer, but certainly Microsoft provides a potential to do the multi-browser testing as well. We'll see over the period of time how we will do the cross-browser testing. Okay, so we are going to launch the application. How we launch an application in coded UI test is we have to create object of browser window. Browser window, I would say browser is equals to browser window dot, there is a static method called as launch in the browser window class, which takes as an argument the URL that you have to launch. So I'm going to launch, let's say, UITestSolution.com. Okay. If I'm going to launch this, if I'm going to run this test will initiate a fresh window, fresh web page, and will launch UITestSolution.com. Let's quickly run it. In order to run it, right click on that specific test and go to run test. You see, it's launching UITestSolution. It will close once the test is done. Cool. All right. So let's look at this site, UITestSolution.com. What we have to do is basically, what we want to create objects for these things. And let's say the test case that I want to automate is, I want to click on login, and I have to provide email and password, and I have to click on login button. So let's try to understand how many different controls that are going to come into picture as far as this particular script is concerned. So first action that we performed is we clicked on login link. Then we have to supply some value here. Let's say Mohit, and then I have to give some password here, and then I have to click login. So there are 4 controls that came into picture as far as this script goes. So first thing is we need to create these objects in my script. So let's go ahead and get started how to create these objects. In order to create an object, we have to in order to create those application controls, we need to create the object of UITestControl. And so UITestControl is basically a class which provides the ability or which provides the mechanism to locate controls on a user interface. So like this particular control, right? So let's try to spy this particular control. So in order to spy this, I'm going to right click and use CodedUI Test Builder. Now I am going to spy this particular control. I am going to drag and drop this control. Now we will see this particular window. This is called as a property window of this particular control. You see here there are search properties which are populated, and then there are some control specific properties, and there are some generic properties. This is the name of the control. So what UITestControl does is UITestControl will help us locating or creating this particular control on this particular web page. Okay, so we'll see how we are going to create this particular button. So I'm going to create object of UITestControl because everything in a web page is basically a UITestControl. Okay, so I'm going to create a control called as UI login link is equals to new UITestControl, and it takes as an argument of its parent. So in a web-based application, the topmost parent is always the browser window. So what is a browser window here? It's browser. So I'm going to copy this here. Okay. Now we created one object of type UITestControl. Second thing, we need to specify what type of technology it belongs to. So how we will come to know? When you spy this object, let's say I'm going to spy it one more time. When I'm going to spy this object, I will see some of the search properties here. So in the search property, you will see technology name. So I have to specify that the control that I have designed, its technology is web. So that's the second step in terms of control designing. How I will write it? I will say UI login dot technology name is equals web. Cool. Next thing what I have to do is I have to specify what type of control it is. So control type is hyperlink, correct? So now, and also I need to specify some of the property which will help UITestControl to uniquely identify this login button. Okay, so one of the property that I'm going to use is I'm going to assign one property called as the control type. So the control type we want is basically a hyperlink that we can see here. So I'm going to specify this particular property here. So I will be writing UI login dot search property dot add. It takes 2 arguments. Add method takes 2 arguments in terms of key value pair. First is ID and other one is its value. So what ID we are trying to assign? Control type. So I will be writing here control type. What is the control type? Hyperlink. So I will be copying it here from here, and I will write this hyperlink. Okay. So now this is one of the property that we assigned to UI login that we created. The other property we need to specify a few more properties, because if you look at here, we said technology name is web and of type hyperlink. If you look at this particular application, there are a lot of hyperlinks and all belongs to the web technology. So we need to have one property at least which helps coded UI to identify the specific control individually. So what is that property? I'm going to spy it again. Most of the time, again, it comes from the development practice. What property is unique? In this particular web application, ID is unique, because if you see this other control contact us, here the ID is LNK CONTANC. For this particular control, the property is different, LNK login. So that means ID will help identifying this particular control individually. So I'm going to write this particular property. How to do it? Once again, same thing. UI login control name dot search properties dot add. Then we need to write what property and what its value. So property is ID and its value is this. Cool. So we got this particular object created. Now what is the next thing we have to do? We have to we were in the home page, we have to click on this particular button. So this particular hyperlink. Now the hyperlink has been identified. I have to perform a click operation on it. So I'm going to write mouse dot click. Mouse is a class in which there is static method called as click. It takes the control which has to be clicked. So what is the control that we are intended to click? Is UI login. Okay. I'm going to introduce a little delay here just to see the behavior. Otherwise it works really fast and it will close down the window. Okay. So this is my one step that we just automated. Okay. I'm going to run this test. Run test. What it's supposed to do, it should launch the browser and then it should click on the login button. See, it clicked on the login button and we got this particular page. Now script is waiting because we introduced some delay in here. All right. Likewise, we are going to create another object. We have to create email ID, because here we are going to pass some value, username or the email ID of a user, and we are going to pass the password, and then we have to click on link. Same step. I'm going to launch a test builder here because I need to find out some of the properties. Okay. I'm going to expand it. ID login email. Here the control type is edit and technology name still stands same, that is web. Okay, so let's go and create this particular object. I'm going to create a new object called again of type UITestControl, and I will say UI email edit is equals to new test control, new UI test control, and I have to pass the browser object, browser window. Again, I have to specify the technology name, so I will say UI email edit dot technology name is equals to web. Then I have to write same search properties. So I'm going to copy it here. Don't copy actually at the initial stage, because we need to write code when we learn. Otherwise, we will not be able to do the best. So I'm going to copy. Control type in this particular case is edit, and ID here is login email. right click, and from here I can copy this, and I will write here. Okay, so this is my second object that I have created. I'm going to comment this code a little bit so we can understand. Login hyperlink, and this particular is email edit. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to pass some username. Let's say I have to pass demo and some password and we pass, and then I have to click on login button. So how to write or how to input on a text box or a edit box in HTML in a web page. In order to do that, right now we are not creating a control in a technology specific way. We are creating a generic controls, and we are specifying explicitly that the technology is of type web. So in this particular case, .text property on a control will not be available. So we will be using keyboard.sendKeys. Ideally, keyboard.sendKeys is a good friend sometimes, but it's a bad enemy. So we have to avoid. But since we are using technology, non-technology specific control, that is, we are creating a generic control, we have no other option. We just have to use keyboard.sendKeys. It takes two arguments. First is with object name. So what is the object where we have to provide, we have to enter the value is UI email edit, and then the value. Let's say I will be writing demo user. So it will print that value. That's the second step is done. Now the next thing we have to do is we need to create the same password field. So everything is going to be same except this login ID, except this ID. ID for this particular case is going to be login underscore password. So I will simply copy this particular code from here, and I will make this as UI password. I'm going to change this. Everything still remains the same except this particular ID. So I'm going to copy this. Okay. Now I have to pass some value in this. What I will do, the same thing, keyboard dot send keys. It takes again the same two type of arguments. First is the control name, that is UI password, and then its value. Let's say I'm going to pass some test 001. Okay, and next thing we need to do is, that's my second thing is done. Now I have to create one more object called as login. So let's spy this, and ID is login sent. Technology here is again web, but you see here the control type this time is button. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this object quickly. I'm going to copy this. Sorry, you can change this. The password edit. I'm going to copy this. I will say login button. Okay, change all these names here. Control type at this point is button. And what is the ID here? And this is the password. Button. Cool. Now what we need to do, we need to click on this. So I will write mouse dot click, and it takes the UI control. So the control is login button. That's done. All the steps been automated, and this is how we created the control. This is basically login button. Login button. Let's quickly run this test. This will not be able to log in because the ID, the user and password is not correct. Okay, so that's fine, but it's gonna go and hit that login button. So let's run this test. Right click and to run test. Okay, I'm going to close this browser. If it will be open, then also nothing is going to happen. It's gonna close. It will launch a new browser. But on safer side, I close it. Right click, run. Okay, it's launching. Now it's going to click on login. It's going demo user. It's password. Cool. It just clicked, and it says email field must contain a valid email address, which is fine, which is the right message. Okay, and my test is pass. Okay, this test is pass. Okay, this test is still not complete. Why? Because this test does not have a validation logic. Let's think about it. What type of validation logic it should have? In case after clicking this button, there should be two things that are supposed to happen. First is either user should be able to log in, or if user is not able to log in, so there should be error message. There should be error message. Correct? Then this test will be failed. If user is able to log in, then we need to capture something, or we need to validate how the user is logging. Maybe in this particular case, when the user will log in, user will be in its dashboard, and there we can validate its name or maybe some message there. In case when the user is not able to log in, then there should be error message, as it came in this particular case. There was an error message, right? So we need to have those things validated. Say here, there was some username. Okay, so this, in case of negative test, this has to be validated. All right, I'm not going to complete that test at this point in time. We will be talking about the assertions pretty soon. But let's try to be very comfortable by creating the objects, because that's the engine of the automation testing. Not only in terms of coded UI, the same applies to QTP and other tools as well. Okay. All right. Now let's, for example, I need to find out how many total links are available in this particular web page. How we can do that? Okay. One thing is clear for sure, that links means technology is going to be web, and control type is going to be hyperlink. Correct? So using that, we will just create one object, and I will be introducing one more new concept called as UITestControlCollection, which basically returns the collection of objects, and using that we will be writing pretty small code to find out how many total links are available in a web page. Okay, so I'm going to create a new test for it. Okay, I'm going to minimize this test. That's my test is done. Now I'm going to write another test. Another test, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have to specify the test attribute test method, because it specifies a test case. I'm going to write void links in a page. That's my test that I have to write. Okay. So as we discussed earlier, what is the first step that we need to do? We need to launch the browser. So in order to launch the browser, we need to create browser window object, and we have to evoke launch method, which is static. So browser window br is equals to browser window dot launch. I will be writing, passing the URL here, UITestSolution.com. Okay. Then I would be creating the same object of UITestControl. Sorry. Let's say links is equals to new UITestControl and of this particular page browser. We need to specify technology. So I will be writing links dot technology name is equals to web. Then we need to specify the control type. We are interested only in total hyperlinks of a particular page. So I will be writing links dot search properties dot add. What is the property name? We need to give control type, and what is its type? Hyperlink. This is case sensitive. Make sure there is no spelling mistake here. I will be replacing all these things with strongly typed, so there would not be a chance of human error, but over the period of time we'll do it. Okay, so my object is created. Okay, a generic object I created. Okay, now what we need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, UITestControlCollection. There is a class called as UITestControlCollection. It returns the it returns basically the collection of all the objects. At this point in time, we are not specific to tell me what are the total different types of link available. We just want the count, so we may not be using this at point, but in the next example I would be putting this forward. As far as the objective of this test goes, we are only concerned about finding the total number of links. So basically what I will be doing is, if I can find matching controls of type links, that means we are done, right? Okay, so I'm creating integer variable, because that number is going to come in integer. Let's say count is equals to links dot find matching controls. There is a property called as find matching controls. It will find all the matching controls dot count. That's it, we are done. Okay, it returns basically the total count of this particular object type, links. Okay, I will go and print this out. So I will write, in order to print it, console dot write line. I will simply say count. Okay, that's it, done. Let's run it quickly. Let's see. At launch, it's calculating, it's finalizing the test results. All right, it's done. I'm going to select this and let's see output. Okay, cool. We got 28 links, and I know these 28 links is correct because that's my app web, so I know. Now let's try to introduce assertion. Okay, let's say I'm expecting I will be writing here, let's say integer expected links. Let's say I'm expecting link 30. Okay. And we need to I'm going to write the validation. Okay. So I will be writing assert and here I will be writing expected link comma count. Or maybe I can, sorry, let's do this way. I will be using these methods later, but I'm going to write assertion manually. If count is equals expected link, then my test is pass, or else my test is failed. So I'm going to write if this is not is equal to expected link, then I have to fail my test. I will be writing assert dot fail, and we can specify the message that oops, count mismatched. Okay, because expected result it will always be known to us, and we have seen the total count that is coming is 28. So at this in this particular case, my assertion has to be my test has to fail. So I'm failing this. I have to make sure there's a condition in my test that fails it. So let's rerun this test. Okay, it's maybe counting this. Okay, it's finalizing the results. Okay, see, it is failed. Assert dot fail. Oops, count mismatch, right? Because we were expecting 20. Let's say I know for the fact total links are 28. If I will run this, it will not fail because control is not going to come inside, so it will pass the test. Okay.